Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military with Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 24 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about another massive missile drone attack in the territory of the city of Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine. This attack took place yesterday on the 10th of July of 2025, and here we can see the approximate routes of Russian attack. We have yellow lines, blue lines and red ones, which means that the Russians use drones, hypersonic missiles, ballistic missiles and cruise missiles. The city of Kyiv was damaged heavily. We have lots of videos and fire anomalies. For example, in this video we can see the consequences of Russian attack. This is the picture. In this video, for example, we can see the city of Kyiv in the morning of the 10th of July of 2025. Almost the entire micro district was damaged. We have lots of fire anomalies. We have a smoke screen. We have Ukrainian helicopters that were flying above this area with the purpose to probably secure the area. According to information we have, the Russians mainly attacked the western part of Ukraine and the southeastern part of Ukraine. The Ukrainian sources reported that the Russians used around 400 drones and around 14 missiles of different types. The Ukrainians reported that managed to bring down 370 drones out of 397. Anyway, despite the work of Ukraine air defense, we see that the Russians managed to deal significant damage. And now we see that Ukrainians have just one problem: they need air defense. More precisely, they need missiles. For example, Britain has not given up on the idea of sending troops to Ukraine and will send Kyiv 5,000 air defense missiles on 3.4 billion probably pounds loan. It's obviously lots of missiles, and these missiles will allow the Ukrainians probably to stand for another month or probably for another half a month or something like this. So the air defense systems is the biggest problem and issue for Ukraine. They're trying to find how to get additional Patriot systems, but the President of the United States of America told Zelensky that he was ready to send missiles, but anyway, this is too expensive. At the same time, we have talks. So we have first round of talks between Marco Rubio and the Sergei Lavrov, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, where they were talking about the future of the conflicts and case statements. Let's discuss them. Today's conversation with the head of the Russian Foreign Ministry was frank. The United States will maintain contact with Russia at any opportunity. The United States hopes to convince NATO allies to transfer some Patriot systems, which is very important. The United States of America will not transfer their own systems, but they will ask some NATO countries. The United States is disappointed with the lack of greater progress on Ukraine. The United States will discuss a new approach to settling the conflict in Ukraine. The US administration is considering the introduction of new sanctions against Russia as one of the possible options. The United States will continue contacts with all partners in order to resolve the conflict in Ukraine despite the lack of progress. The US did not make a decision to stop military aid to Ukraine. It was a matter of suspension. So today we have very interesting statement made by the President of the United States of America that he is going to say something on Monday. He is going to talk about Russia, and most likely he is going to talk about sanctions. Another important thing that is several pro-Russian resources reported that they got probably some drafts of agreement or some messages from different very reliable sources that the Russians are going to make some compromise regarding the conflict in Ukraine. So what kind of compromise the Russians are talking about, we don't understand, but obviously we're going to see this on Monday during the next several days. So the next days are going to be very interesting. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation on the ground. We have lots of very interesting updates. And first we're going to talk about the Kupiansk direction, more precisely about the central Kupiansk and about the southern Kupiansk directions. The Russians continue their offensive operation in the direction of the settlement by the name of Barova. So this is the Barova direction or the central Kupiansk area, and the Russians managed to improve their positions significantly. According to information we have, the Russians launched their offensive operation in this area somewhere on the 9th of July of 2025. So this is the situation on the ground by the end of the 9th of July. By the end of the 10th of July, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly, and this was recorded by the pro-Ukrainian resources from Deep State, and we have geolocation that indeed confirmed this progress on the ground. In this video we can see how Russians were attacking this dense network of the fortifications, this stronghold. Several Russian stormtroopers, you can see them, were attacking this stronghold, and as a result of clashes between Russian and Ukrainian soldiers, the Russians managed to take this territory under complete control. So based on this video we adjusted the map, but later we clarified the progress on the ground, because the Russians were not able to get this stronghold without controlling territories behind them. So this is the current situation by the morning of the 11th of July of 2025. You know that this is the most interesting direction, because most of the mappers show completely different picture between the villages of Novaya Kruglyakivka, Boguslavka and Zagryzovo. Some sources, like where we color the entire territory under complete Russian control, some sources report that some villages are under Ukraine control. So it seems that currently there are very heavy clashes in this area, and both the Russians and the Ukrainians are attacking each other with the purpose to control the initiative. So it seems that the Russians are going to continue their offensive operation, and the main purpose of the Russians is to get as close as possible to the settlement of Barova, which will allow the Russians to establish certain control over this territory and to force the Ukrainians to fall back from deep pocket from the eastern part of the area. We are talking about the villages of Novosergeyevka, Novoigorovka, Stepova and the Chervony Stav. As for the Lyman direction, we have changes on the ground. They are very important. Let's first of all compare the map between the dates. So this is the situation by the end of the 10th of July of 2025. This is the situation probably by the end of the 9th of July. This is probably the moment when the Russians launched their offensive, or somewhere on the 8th of July more precisely. Yes, this is the map that we can see in front of your screens. This is the situation on the 8th of July. The Russians were about to secure the village of Zelena Dolina, and starting from the 8th of July, we were adding more and more territories as contested area. And for example, by the morning of the 11th of July of 2025, we have added additional contested area, and we have colored the village of Zelena Dolina completely. And this video was published by the Russian sources, and here we can see the process how the Russians were securing the territory of Zelena Dolina. The Russians were clearing one basement after another, and based on this video, we colored the village completely. So the sources who has connections with the situation on the ground promised that probably today or maybe tomorrow the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation would confirm complete control over the settlement, and most likely we're going to see some videos with Russia's flag. So as we can see, the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to shorten the distance to the village of Shandrigolova to 570 kilometers from the northeast, and something around 4 kilometers, 4.68 from the east. So the Russians are getting closer and closer to the settlements, and the battle for this area is going to start very soon. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Konstantinovka direction, where the Russians also continue their offensive operation. The most important updates are coming from the area of Yabunovka. As a result of clashes, according to information we have, the Russians managed to secure another stronghold. This territory was taken by the Russians. This video was published by the 36th Marine Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, where we can see how Ukrainians were attacking Russian positions in this area with FPV drones. So there were lots of episodes during that video, and one of the episodes was geolocated exactly in this point. So the Russians secured this stronghold, and as you can see, according to this map, according to this configuration, the Russians since the beginning for the village of Yabunovka managed to secure up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 big strongholds, and we see that there are just 3 left to finish the battle for this territory, which means that very soon the battle for Yabunovka will be finished, and the Russians will secure this territory completely, and this will open the Russians a window of opportunities to move further in the northeastern directions towards the settlement of Konstantinovka. Now let's move further. Let's discuss the situation in the Pakrov's direction. The Ukrainians are in panic. Today we start receiving videos once again of the living roads between the city or the Pakrovsk agglomeration and the Konstantinovka agglomeration. And here we can see these roads are completely filled with destroyed equipment. The Ukrainians are saying that the Russians use hundreds of drones almost every single 2-3 days to attack vehicles, to attack different cars in this area that Ukrainians used to supply for logistic, basically for logistic. So this is the article that was published by the pro-Ukrainian resources. According to updated data for yesterday and tonight, the Russian armed forces launched more than 100 FPV drones over Dobropolye. As previously reported, this is a purely terror of local residents. The largest of the targets were civilian objects. That was stated by Ukrainian sources. So according to them, the Russians established complete FPV drone control over this territory, which means that Ukrainians have huge problems with with logistics, especially with evacuated or wounded, and of bringing additional forces and equipment to the city of Pokrovsk and Mirnograd and Novoekonomichne, where the Russians continue their offensive operation. As for the settlement of Novoekonomichne, by the beginning of the 11th of July of 2025, we still haven't received anything regarding the situation on the ground. I would like to remind you that almost a week ago the Russians entered the settlement, but as from that moment we haven't received even a single change on the ground. And now let's discuss the situation in the Dnepropetrovsk direction, where the Russians continue their offensive operation. As you can see, we have changes. The Russians improved their positions once again. Currently, the Russians are trying to finish the battle for the settlement of Mirne, and the Russians continue offensive in the direction of Novokhtatska, Zelený Gai, and Grushevka. So this is the situation by the end of the 9th of July, when the Russians just finished the battle for the settlement of Tolstoy. This video was published by the channels affiliated with the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation. Here we can see flags and many other different things that signals and confirm Russian control over the territory. By the end of the 10th of July, the pro-Ukrainian resources reported that the Russians answered the settlement of Mirne and established control over the central part, which is already the beginning of complete collapse of Ukrainian defense in this area. Furthermore, according to geolocations, the Russians managed to improve their positions to the village of Voskresenka. This information was also confirmed by neutral mappers. And as for the beginning of the 11th of July of 2025, the Russians got a bit closer to the settlement of Voskresenka itself from the east, and the Russians improved their positions to the west and to the northwest of the settlement of Tolstoy by getting closer and closer to the settlement of Grushkovska, which most likely will be taken by the Russians in coming hours. As for the Zaporozhye direction, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians continue the siege of the village of Plavny by attacking Ukrainian forces and units in this area with FPV drone. In this video, we can see lots of episodes how Russians were attacking different equipment and different positions of the armed forces of Ukraine in this area. Furthermore, the Russians during the previous 24 hours managed to discover the concentration of Ukrainian forces in the area of the city of Nikolaev. In this video, we can see a temporary deployment point of the armed forces of Ukraine that was attacked by the Russian Iskander missile. As a result of attack, the entire building was completely destroyed. The sources didn't report us about the losses, but most likely the losses were pretty huge. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.